focused his mind on the sort of origin of our suffering, and after attaining enlightenment, Buddha began to, our Gautama Buddha began to think about how all the entire mass of suffering began. Up to his time, many people, many traditions thought it was either created by oneself or created by others or created by both or happened accidentally, fortuitously. Then Buddha saw in his first recital in what you call Udana, he expressed his joy of discovering this method. He says, when sage, he said in Pali, Yada have patu bhavanti dhamma atapino jayato brahmanasa atasya kanka vapayanti sabba yato pajanati sahetu dhamman. Meaning, when ardent, perseverant, sage contemplate the origin of suffering, then he saw the causes of dhammas, In this happened in the first watch of the night he attained enlightenment. In the second watch, he saw these causes cease. And then in the third watch, he saw ascending and descending order of the causes and conditions. This is the beginning of dependent origination. So first, I like to mention the steps. You all know them, many of them know by heart. By reciting, repeating these 12 steps itself is not knowing, understanding dependent origination. It is more involved and deep teaching. First is that dependent upon ignorance, volitional formations arise. Now, when ignorance is there, volitional formations arises at the same time. I mentioned yesterday what the ignorance is. Ignorance is not knowing the Four Noble Truths, the suffering, cause of suffering, end of suffering, and the path leading to the end of suffering. Now, then one might think when the volitional ignorance is depending on ignorance, volitional formations arises. Then one can think and ask, dependent on what ignorance arises? Because nothing can come into existence without causes and conditions. Answer to this question we find in Samma Ditti Sutta, where Venerable Sariputta explained, dependent on asava, influx, ignorance arises. Then one can ask where what uh, influxes depends on. So then we say nothing comes instant without causes and conditions. Then influx also must have some causes and conditions depending on what influx arises. Influx arises dependent on ignorance. Ignorance arises depending on influxes. These are called mutually supporting factors. They are called anya manya pachaya. They support each other. And influx, one of the influxes is ignorance itself. Their influxes are called asava, kamasava, bhavasava, ditthasava, avijjasava. Kamasava, bhavasava, ditthasava, avijjasava. Asava, sense pleasure is one influx. Bhavasava, to continue existence, desire for continuing existence is called bhavasava. Ditthasava is influx of wrong view. Avijjasava is influx of ignorance. Now, ignorance plays as influx as well as the cause of avijja, volitional formations. So, volitional formations arise depending on ignorance. Ignorance arises depending on asava. Asava arises depending on ignorance. So, in other words, ignorance doesn't have a beginning in itself, because if one were to say ignorance began at such and such a time, then one can ask, does that mean before that time there was no ignorance? Therefore, you cannot find the beginning of ignorance. And similarly, one of the asava is kama asava, desire. Somebody can ask when desire started. That question also is unanswerable, because if we say desire started at such and such a time, then one can ask the same question, was there a time without desire? So these two factors in Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, Buddha said desire is the cause of suffering. In dependent origination, Buddha says ignorance is the cause of suffering. That means both of them have equal weight. Without ignorance, desire doesn't arise. Desire doesn't arise without ignorance. Therefore, these two also are interdependent or mutually supportive factors. Anya manya pacce. They support each other. And therefore, we cannot find the beginning of ignorance, nor can we find the beginning of desire. But both ignorance and desire are the causes of suffering. In Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, Tasaya Tanhaya Asesa Viraga Nirodho. No, Tasaya Eva Tanhaya, what do you call, Sakopanesa Tanna Katta Nirujyamana Nirujyati Katta Nirujyamana Nirujyati Katta. We just recited it the other day. Where this craving ceases, this craving ceases, pahiyamana pahiyati, katta niruddhamana nirujyati, katta pahiyamana pahiyati. Where does this craving arise and where does this craving cease? I think with this note, I like to stop right now. And then after this meditation session, we pick it up again and continue the explanations. So for now, you remember I stop at where craving begins and where craving ceases. Now let us begin our metta practice, and then may all beings be happy and secure. May all beings have happy minds. Whatever living beings there may be, without exception, weak or strong, long, large, medium, short,
subtle or
gross,
gross,
visible or invisible, living near or far, born or coming to birth. May all beings have happy minds. Let no one deceive another, nor despise anyone anywhere, neither from anger nor ill will should anyone wish harm to another. As a mother would risk her own life to protect her only child, even so towards all living beings one should cultivate a boundless heart. One should cultivate for all the world a heart of boundless loving friendliness, above, below, and all around, unobstructed, without
hatred or resentment,
whether
whether
standing,
standing,
walking,
walking,
sitting,
sitting,
lying
lying
down,
down,
or
or
whenever
whenever
awake,
awake.
one
One
should
should
develop
develop
this
this
mindfulness.
mindfulness.
This
This
is
is
called
called
divinely
divinely
dwelling
dwelling
here,
here,
not
not falling
falling into
into
erroneous
erroneous
views,
views,
but
but
virtuous
virtuous
and
and endowed
endowed
with
with
vision,
vision, removing
removing
desires
desire for
for sensual
sensual
pleasures.
pleasures.
One
One
comes
comes
never
never
again
again
to
to
birth
birth
in
in
the
the womb.
womb. This, friends, is our very earnest wish that we want to cultivate in our mind all together as one human unit, as one body with one mind. We all practice this metta. This is more important today than ever before, and therefore, without any reservation, hesitation, second thought, let us cultivate this thought of metta in our mind, wishing all suffering beings to be free from suffering. And then, as the part of our meditation, an important part also, is let us focus our mind on the breathing and breathe very mindfully, paying total attention to the breath. Friends, only when we pay attention, things that we have never seen before, never experienced before, we can experience, and therefore pay total attention to the breath. As we breathe in and breathe out, you notice there is a pause between inhaling and exhaling. When the inhaling ends, there is a brief pause before exhaling begins. When exhaling ends, There's a very brief pause before inhaling begins, noticing this entire breathing, and then while breathing we feel the breath, we perceive the breath, we pay mindful attention to the breath, and we become conscious of the breath. These are called five aggregates, putting in a very brief way and also putting them in a nutshell. And you can see as we breathe in and out, all these feelings, perceptions, thought, consciousness, all flow with the flow of the breath. As breath changes, they all change. And noticing this change, you become bodily relaxed, mentally relaxed, your breath relaxed, and then there is no room in mind for hindrances to enter. They all temporarily subside. Greed, resentment, restlessness and worry, sleepiness and drowsiness, and doubt are the hindrances. They will not enter our mind. With this calm, relaxed, peaceful state without hindrances, we gain concentration. When we gain concentration, our mind is filled with the thought of letting these things happen, letting them appear and disappear, or letting them go. This is one time, sometimes we call thought of letting go. And then metta arises more strongly, and then compassion arises, joy arises, and happiness arises, concentration arises. All this will happen only if we pay mindful attention, undivided attention to our experience of rising, falling, appearing and disappearing of body, the breath, feeling, perceptions, thought and consciousness, and then you will see the truth of what I said. Dukkha pattaja nidukkha, bhaya pattaja nibhaya, soka pattaja nisoka, hontu sabbe pipanino. May the suffering be free from suffering. May the fear struck be free from fear. May the grieving be free from grief. So too may all beings be. This is our earnest wish, as I mention every day, with a pure, clean heart, with the practice of metta and mindfulness and concentration. We are in a very good position to wish all those who are suffering, the number of patient people affected by COVID COVID-19 is still increasing rather than decreasing, and that is the very reason for us to be even stronger in our practice to clear our mind, pure our mind, to wish them to be free from fear, tension, anxiety, worry, and death. And all those who are very sincerely dedicate their lives to support them, to prevent it, and discover some kind of remedy like vaccine to help these people. And we want all of them to be successful in finding something to help these people. And all those rulers have wise decision. May they be wiser. May they all come up with one mind, one heart to support these people and remove this COVID-19 from earth. With this earnest wish, we want all of them to be peaceful, happy, and live long in very good health. Now, I want to continue where I stopped. I stopped saying that the first sermon, Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, Buddha said craving is the source and cause of suffering, as in the Four Noble Truths, the cause of suffering is craving. And craving does not arise without ignorance. Ignorance arises with craving. Now, since this is this is a sort of a cycle, we have to start from somewhere to break and find the beginning and end of this cycle. This is called samsara vata. Vata means a circle or cycle that keeps going on and on and on without being able to find a beginning or an end. And therefore, Buddha came up with a very practical solution to or way or method of breaking this cycle. Even though you cannot find the beginning or end of a circle, he found a beginning as well as end of this circle. And that beginning is ignorance of not knowing the Four Noble Truths. And ignorance arises with desire. And desire arises with ignorance. When one understands at least desire, ignorance is even more difficult to understand because it blocks our vision, understanding. But craving we can understand somewhat easily because we have seen, we are seeing, experiencing the pain, suffering that we go through when we are greedy. I mentioned several times in dependent origination formula, when this arises formula. When craving arises, pain arises simultaneously, concurrently at the same time. Now, in the Mahasatipatthana, I said we have to start from somewhere. In Mahasatipatthana Sutta, Buddha gave 60 places where craving arises. It is very easy for each and every one of us to remember these 60 places. It is repetitive. Let me begin with that 60. We have 6 senses. Each sense has 10 places to arise greed. For example, eye is pleasing, agreeable to all of us. In the eye, craving arises. And the visual objects, craving arises in visual objects. Consciousness that arises depending on these two, craving arises in that consciousness. Then the craving arises in the contact. When these three come together, eyes, visual objects, consciousness, and then when these three come together, contact arises. This is called eye contact. Then when these four work together, feeling arises. So craving arises in feeling. Craving arises with perception of form called rupa sanya. And craving arises in the thought about rupa sanya. That's called rupa sanchetana. Then craving arises rupa tanha. It is very interesting. Craving arises from craving. That is, craving perpetuate, multiply from craving. Then we begin to think. That is called rupa vitakka. Vitakka means thinking. Sankappa, vitakka in Pali, we call these two terms and many others for thinking. And then we thinking also proliferate. There are two kinds of proliferation, physical proliferation and mental proliferation. Mental proliferation is called papancha. Papancha means that which delay our attainment of liberation. So these are the 10 places where craving arises, starting from the eye. And then same thing goes with the ear, nose, tongue, body, and mind. That means we have 6 senses. Craving arises in 60 places depending on each sense. I mentioned only 10 10 places where craving arises depending on eye. Let me repeat them. Eye, craving arises in the eye because eye is pleasing, agreeable to us. Form, pleasing, agreeable to us, craving arises there. Then consciousness that arises depending on for eye and visual object, craving arises there. Then when these three combine together, contact arises. Contact also is pleasing to us. Then craving arises in the contact. Then feeling arises. Especially when the feeling arises, craving arises there. The feeling can be pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. Doesn't matter. When pleasant feeling arises, we crave for pleasant feeling, and then craving arises. unpleasant feeling, crave arises, we want to get rid of unpleasant feeling. And neutral feeling arises because of ignorance of what happens in the neutral state, and desire arises to get rid of that confusion that arises. So therefore, whatever feeling we experience, craving also arises with that feeling. Then we perceive. The number 6 is perceive. Perception is pleasant, agreeable, and craving arises there. Then when we perceive, then we begin to think about the object. Craving arises there. Then what we think, craving arises because we think more and more about it, thought, and then craving arises, and that craving multiply more craving, and then we begin to think, and we continue thinking further, more detail, craving arises, then it becomes proliferate and multiply, sustain, remain in our mind, and then craving arises there. You can see these 10 places that craving arises depending on I. The same way, depending on ear, nose, tongue, body and mind, 10 places craving arises. And therefore, we have 60 places where craving arises. And then, when we practice mindfulness of impermanence very diligently, impartially, then craving that arises in the I, depending on I, ceases, comes to an end. So when mindfulness, we practice mindfulness, then all this, that craving that arises in these 60 places cease, stop, then and there. Where craving arises, we focus the mind there, their craving ceases because craving is impermanent. And whatever arises from that is impermanent. So we see impermanence as the factor that affects everything in any life, any existence. So in the dependent origination formula, I mentioned that only thing we have to remember in the dependent origination formula, when this arises, this arises. When craving arises, pain arises. When craving ceases, pain ceases. When impermanence arises, notion of permanency disappears. Permanency is one of the distorted perception. Distorted perceptions are, we see impermanence as permanent, unsatisfactoriness as satisfactoriness, unpleasantness as pleasantness, and non-self as self. Atte dukkhe sukha sanya, asubhe subha sanya, anicce nicca sanya, anatte atta sanya. These are perceptions. Sanya means perception. And the perception of self is a distorted perception. Perception of pleasantness is distorted perception. Perception of permanency is distorted perception. And unpleasantness, perception of pleasantness is distorted perception, where there is unpleasantness. So the objects are neither pleasant nor unpleasant. Objects are neither pleasant nor unpleasant. But the way we perceive it with the distortion in the mind, we assume something pleasant or unpleasant, beautiful or ugly. It is our perception. That is a distorted perception. In reality, nothing is beautiful, nothing is ugly, nothing is pleasant, nothing is unpleasant. So things are always in a state of flux. Now, in the uh, Buddha's teaching, we try to clean and purify our mind through the practice of mindfulness to see this reality of each and every step of the uh, dependent origination, 12 steps. We can see they are not uh, listed as something beautiful or ugly or pleasant or unpleasant, belonging to one tradition or another tradition. These are universal factors, universal factors. So the factor that when one arises, the other arises is the natural natural law. They not created by somebody, but this is the natural law. Dependent origination explains this very natural law that all everything that exists. Now, in our discussion of dependent origination, we don't go into various areas outside ourselves. We discuss the dependent origination in relation to ourselves, human or living beings. Particularly for our understanding, we want to discuss dependent origination in the context of human being. And therefore, this is my introduction. And tomorrow onward, I will speak more in very speak on specific aspect of dependent origination, 12 factors. Some of them are clear, some of them are not clear, and we want to take at least one of them at a time and talk. I don't know how long it will take, but let us begin from discussing each factor of the dependent origination. For now, this is all time I have for this morning. And in the afternoon or in the evening session, we will have a general discussion, or you may ask questions from what I said now. I think that will be a better plan. I speak this very short period in the morning on dependent origination. In the evening, if you remember what I said now, you can formulate your question and ask me in the evening. Then the whole day will be a talk and discussion on the same topic. Now, once again, friends, I'm very happy that you all came. Let us wish all together in unison as one body, one mind with clean, pure state, that all living beings, especially those who are suffering in various parts of the world, suffering from this COVID-19, and may they be well, happy and peaceful and return to their normal health and live long in very, very good health. And thank you very much for joining me in wishing all of them peace, happiness, and long life. Thank you.